Hi, my name's Liz Rotherham and I work for Guy Carpenter. I was diagnosed with bipolar back in 2003 and suffered a major psychotic episode. A psychotic episode, for people that don't know, is when you lose total rationalisation of your mind. I thought I was Jesus' sister, I had grandiose ideas, I was in a state of euphoria, and no matter what people said to me, I didn't listen to them. I wanted to stop a train with my hand, and because I had superpowers, I knew that I could do it and I'd be resurrected. Lucky for me, my boss spotted the symptoms and signs because one of his family members had something very similar. So he called my parents, they came and picked me up, they took me to the GP. They then took me to a mental hospital. I didn't realise it was a mental hospital at the time, and I was actually assessed in front of a panel of 5 people. And they actually diagnosed me with bipolar at the time and sectioned me under the Mental Health Act, and they kept me in hospital for a month. Throughout that month, I was actually constantly given medication on a daily basis. It took me from a state of euphoria into a state of depression. So when I left hospital, I had to go back with my parents. They wouldn't allow it any other way. So I lost my car, my house, and my job was in jeopardy. And I then spiralled into a clinical depression where I didn't get out of bed for 2 weeks. I laid there looking at a tree thinking my life was over. And again, I wanted to end my life. My parents had to watch me 24/7 because I would have definitely jumped in front of a train at the other end of the spectrum, hence the bipolar, because they're different highs and lows. It took me 10 months to actually get back to a state of sort of normality. And then I returned to work. And it was like walking on eggshells. Everyone treated me like some sort of alien, I suppose. And I was bullied before, hence the fact that I probably went into psychosis, and the bullying started again. So I thought, do you know what, I don't want to go through this again. So I actually left my job. I didn't want to acknowledge that I'd been diagnosed with bipolar and some sort of mental health condition. So I carried on drinking and going back to normal, not taking my medication, and subsequently went into another episode the following year, and then for another 3 years, and have been probably over the last 15 years, had about 8 or 9 episodes where I've had to be sectioned because I've wanted to end my own life. But when I started Marsh McLennan, my boss at the time, she's lovely actually, and she knew that I'd got bipolar as well, and it didn't make any difference. And I felt like I'd been accepted in a weird way, and they were so supportive. And I actually had 2 episodes at work. When I was sectioned, my manager actually came and visited me in hospital, and then I had a phased return back to work, and I went to see an occupational health advisor who was brilliant, who gave me some coping mechanisms. They looked at my workload as well, and took some of that away to help me so it wasn't in such a stressful situation, and they were very, very, very supportive, which is great. There was also an employment assistant program as well, which was very helpful. I used that as well when things weren't going too well. I actually rang them up and they were very, very helpful across the telephone as well. I was there for 7 years, and then I was actually made redundant from Marsh. It was quite a stressful time for me, both out of work and in work. And I left Marsh and unfortunately went into a massive psychotic episode, and I ended up being sectioned again, and it was probably one of the worst experiences I've ever had, because they put me in what's called Section 136, which is solitary confinement. And because they couldn't find me a bed on the main ward, I was actually in there for 3 days. I never went in feeling suicidal, but I actually became suicidal in there because, anyone who's with no mental health condition, being in a locked, confined space for 3 days is horrendous, but I had my psychosis to deal with. Luckily for me, my ex-manager, she found that there was a job available in Guy Carpenter, and so he invited me in for an interview. And I thought to myself, right, okay, in the past, I might not have been honest, but sometimes in interviews, you don't have to disclose that you've got bipolar. And I thought to myself, if I'm going to make a difference in this world, I'm going to be totally honest. Bearing in mind I have suffered stigma and discrimination before, but in the interview I had, I told my potential manager everything about my condition. I actually said, this is what I've got, this is what I've been through, And you know what? He was so shocked because he saw me as this positive person and he'd had no idea that I'd got bipolar. And I think that is quite a stringent point actually, because you can't actually see mental. With the physical health you can, but with the mental health you can't. He said, I'd like to offer you the job. Well, I'll tell you what, I could not believe it. I was absolutely over the moon. I felt like high-fiving him. I didn't actually do it, but I felt like it. And yeah, I've been with Guy Carpenter for the last year and a half. It's been amazing, so supportive, as well as when I was with Marsh. So I'm now with Guy Carpenter. I actually went into an episode again last year, unfortunately. I ended up being sectioned again, but work was so supportive. You know, my manager and the HR person, they actually came out and visited me at my home when I was discharged. They put in place like an action plan when I got back to work. They said, right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to review you. And they just kept an eye on me. And it didn't feel like they were monitoring me for that sort of reason. They were just trying to look after my health, which is so important because, you know, I'm perfectly capable of doing a really good job, and I'm not blowing my trumpet here, but just because I've been diagnosed with bipolar doesn't mean that, you know, I'm not capable of doing things. I'm now a certified mental health first aid instructor, which means I can actually deliver a 2-day course and train up mental health first aiders, but the course is brilliant. It's provided by the Mental Health First Aid England, and it just gives people the confidence to actually spot signs and symptoms. It goes through each mental health condition in quite detail. It's quite an intensive course, but also it's a very interactive course. We don't train you up to become counsellors, but we actually give you the skills in order to signpost people. It's so very important to listen to people and actually really listen, because a lot of it is that is what people want you to do. And I'm so grateful that the company agreed to it, because it will enable staff to be able to spot signs and symptoms of other people that are actually within the office. If they notice someone that might not be themselves or something like that, you can just question it and maybe avoid them going off sick or something like that and prevent something worse happening. I'm so passionate about this because everyone has mental health. We all have minds. And whether you've been diagnosed or not, you at some point in your life, whether it's family or yourself, goes through some kind of mental health condition or issue. And I want to end the stigma and discrimination that faces our world. And if I can help someone in some way to make a difference, then that is why I do what I do. That's why I speak out and talk about what I've been through. And if I can educate and help people, then I'm just going to carry on doing what I'm doing.